Everybody's looking for a tree, but God doesn't give out trees. He usually gives out seeds.
This is the Church Growth Nation podcast.
What's up, everybody? This is Ross Turner with the Vibrant Agency, and today we're talking with Jason Warman of CoastLife Church there in Florida, and they have been really doing some cool things for the Lord. Their church is a healthy church. It's growing, and man, today we wanted to talk with Jason and kind of hear the story of the church, kind of talk about leadership and church culture and kind of how their church has been able to reach a lot of people for the Lord, and just kind of hear their story. So what's up, Jason?
Hey, man, it's so good to see you. Thanks for having me on today.
You look like you're in a 5-star luxury suite in there.
Man, I'm hanging out in our middle school building while another building is slightly under construction right now. So just trying to find a quiet space around here.
You and me, I mean, I feel like we have kindred spirits. Look at the ginger beard going on.
We got the beard game going. I appreciate that.
Awesome. So you guys are in Venice, Florida. What part of the state is that geographically?
So we're on the west coast of Florida, down in southwest Florida. So we're pretty far down. I always tell people we're closer to Havana than we are Atlanta down here. So it's sort of the retirement capital of the world. This is where all of the eastern part of the U.S. comes to slow down and retire. But it's a beautiful area. It's the Sarasota area of Florida is where Venice is, where it's Sarasota County. Sarasota is an amazing, beautiful city. We love where we live. It's really paradise down here.
Beautiful beaches with the white sand.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah. Now, did you have a career before you became a pastor, or has this been your whole life?
You know, I was in college, was playing some sports and tracking to do some other things, but wasn't really, I knew what the call of God was on my life from when I was a kid and was just running from it. And so had an amazing encounter with God when I was 19 years old, surrendered back to Christ, answered the call to ministry, went home, left college, took a semester off, went from a university to a small unaccredited Bible college and got a Bible college degree, and ended up being a youth pastor, and for a long time just doing different things in ministry before ending up in Florida and leading a church.
So you were born in Arkansas, is that right?
Yeah, born and raised in Arkansas. Moved to Mississippi. Played baseball for a little junior college in Mississippi, and ended up back in Arkansas. Married a girl from Michigan. Went from rural Arkansas to the suburbs of Detroit. Big transition, and then from Michigan to Florida, and love the people of Michigan. Great people. Very happy to be in Florida, not in Michigan.
I hear everything you just said. Let me ask you, if I cut your arm, do you bleed like Razorback Arkansas colors, or are you like Gator colors?
No. I'm Hogs all the way.
Okay.
I don't ride bandwagons. I've been a Razorback fan since I was a kid, and a lot more to celebrate if I were a Florida fan, but we stick with our Hogs regardless of how well they're doing.
It's crazy to me how in different parts of the country, like the emphasis on different sport genre is so intense. Like in the SEC area, college football is life. Okay, and it's life, and the college, and then we're here in California, and people like UCLA and Stanford and USC, but life is the Dodgers and the Lakers, and now like the Rams and the Raiders, the pro sports that are so much more popular out here. And then I grew up in Minnesota, and nobody cares about basketball at all, and so I was always the odd man out because I like the Lakers a lot. I like the NBA, and so it just is funny how everybody has their different passions. You know what I mean?
I love SEC football sports, but what's crazy about Florida is absolutely no one is from Florida. So there's not,
Yeah.
there's not really a predominant. Obviously, the Gators around Gainesville and Tallahassee is the Seminoles, and Miami is the Hurricanes. But it's funny. Some churches really experience, like, if a team's playing on a weekend, it affects their attendance. We don't have any of that because nobody's from here. I mean, you're just as likely to run into a New York Giants fan as you are a Tampa Bucks fan. It's crazy.
Yeah. Now, last thing, I'll just talk about sports for a second, but I am hearing rumors.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going with the sports thing.
No, but I for real am hearing, like, I think for real rumors that the Tampa Bay Rays are going to split with Canada in like half the year in Canada. Is that true?
I don't know. I heard that as well. I don't think it's true because the Tampa's planning on building like a stadium in a really cool area of Tampa, and it's like $700 million or something. So I can't imagine they would spend that kind of money for a part-time team. So I'm hoping that's not true. I hope they build that stadium and they stay put. They're a great team. They just need a better environment.
Yeah. Now, when you were first moving to Florida, did you move to plant the church, or did you come out here for other reasons?
You know, when I was 27, I got offered a church in Pensacola, up in the Panhandle of Florida. Was living in Michigan, was married, no kids, and just didn't feel right about the season of our life stepping into a lead pastor role, and so we ended up not taking that position. And the only thing I can tell people is that somehow Florida got in my heart. Like, I knew that wasn't the church for me, and I knew that wasn't the time for me, but I just knew that was the place for me. And so I had no idea how all of that stuff was going to work out. Had always had it in my heart that I would move to Florida and plant a church. I always tell people, I always qualify it. Like, I felt called here. I didn't just come here for beaches and sunshine and all of that stuff. My skin's too pasty for the beach. My time at the beach is just slathering on sunscreen nonstop. So that it's funny that I am where I am, but just felt called to this state, wanted to plant, was a part of an organization that was pretty closed off theologically to the rest of the Christian world, and I didn't see myself planting through that denomination, that organization, and so was really stuck because my upbringing and my world was kind of built around that. But my wife and I really saw a church that wouldn't be held back by some of the traditional things and some of the theological things that had some misalignment with what we felt like was really biblical and in step with most other Christian organizations, denominations, and so didn't really know what to do. And one day I got a phone call from a guy that I did not know, and invited me to come to Venice to preach the 25th anniversary of the church here in this city. And so I was in Detroit metro area. He invited me to come speak in Sarasota in January. So I left Detroit with the snow blowing sideways. It was 20 degrees, and I landed in Sarasota, and it was 75 and sunshine in January. And I thought, man, this feels like the will of God. This is awesome. And just was amazing, And so I come to the church and preach their 25th anniversary. And on the big 25th anniversary celebration, there were 18 people, and that included myself and 2 other guests. So there were only 15 people from the church there to celebrate their 25th anniversary celebration. And I kind of picked up on there was something more than me just being a guest speaker for this church, because the pastor of the church was driving me around the city, telling me what a great city it is and how it'd be a great place to raise a family. I had 2 small kids, and so I started to pick up on it. He drove me down. We're on the Gulf of Mexico, so he drove me down in his truck. I'll never forget it. We sat in his truck and watched the sunset. It was very romantic, just me and him, and and like he's showing me all the positive things about this community. And I preached Sunday morning. It was an old school traditional church. Preached Sunday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night schedule. And after knowing him 24 hours, he asked me to, step in his office, wanted to have a conversation after the evening service, and said that he was 75. He started the church when he was 50 and had unfortunately been diagnosed with cancer, had no one to turn the church over to, and asked me to come take it. I'd known the guy 24 hours. And I did what you do when you don't want to give an answer. Yeah, I told him that I'd have to talk to my wife and kind of put it off a little bit. It was so bad. It was the piano player was in his late 80s. He didn't know how to play the piano. He just started learning in his late 80s because they lost all their musicians. They still did testimony service. Some people may be familiar with this stuff, but they did testimony service that went on. I think I clocked it at about 40 minutes, and that was only 3 testimonies. And it wasn't really testimonies about what God had done. It was basically like updates on medical conditions like high blood pressure and sciatic nerve situations. It was awful. It was terrible. And I sat there and I was angry and was mad about it, and didn't really realize at the moment that one of the reasons I was ticked off was because I think sometimes that's how God calls you to something. Is sometimes what makes you angry is what God's calling you to do something about. And I didn't realize it at the time, but God was really connecting me emotionally to this place that I was just angry that there was a church that was supposed to be a church of Jesus that was in that bad of a shape and that lifeless and dead. And so he offered me the church. I told him I'd talk to my wife. There was on average between 12 and 15 people attending the church. I always tell people that it was roughly the size of a secret terrorist cell, but about twice as me. And it was, I called my wife, and I don't know why to this day, but I lied to her and told her there was 30 people in the church. I don't really know why I did that, other than 30 sounded better than 12. And we came to this conclusion that we would come spend a week in the city. And we did. We came and spent a week here, and just felt like it was something God was leading us to do. And so we ended up making the decision to move a 3-year-old. My wife was expecting at the time, so we actually had to wait for her to have the baby. So when we moved here, we actually moved here with a 3.5-year-old and a 6-week-old to take a church that had 12 people in it. It was just one of those things that you really are stepping out into an unknown world and just really, really walking in faith,
Did you have savings, or did church loan or something, or how did you even swing that?
No, well, it's a crazy story. No, we were at the worst point of our lives financially. It was 2009 when I got the phone call, and I was moving from Michigan to Florida, and back in 2008 and 2009 was the recession. And the 2 states that got hit the hardest were Michigan because of the auto industry, and Florida because of the real estate market. Everybody has second homes down here, and when real estate collapsed, they all let their second homes go. And so it was the craziest season of my life. With a loan from my father-in-law, there was supposed to be finances in the church. There wasn't the finances in the church when I actually took over the accounts, there was $200 in the church account and $800 worth of bills sitting on the desk when I actually took over the accounts. And so I know that's not like $600 isn't a huge gap, but when that's all you have is $200 and you owe $800, it seems insurmountable at the time. But that was the situation that we stepped into.
And how did you know that God was in it, or did you not? Were you still on the fence, but you had a gut feeling, or did you have some sort of like an angel came and slapped you in the face and told you? I mean, how'd you know?
Well, I did. I left angry, and I felt like I had to do something like that after that first Sunday. I don't know why. I think a lot of people could have just laughed that off. Like, that was a really bad speaking engagement. I'm going to go back home. But one is I felt called to Florida. Two is it ticked me off, and I felt like I had to do something about it. And then, God has a way of just walking you through a process. It's we walk by faith, step by step. He doesn't show you the whole road. He just shows you, a lamp into your feet, light into your path, just one step at a time. And so we moved here in 2009. My first official weekend, I got installed as the pastor. And my first official weekend after the installation was it was this time of year. It was the 4th of July weekend. It wasn't 4th of July week. It wasn't 4th of July, but it was the weekend around the 4th of July holiday. And so everybody travels, takes vacation. So I inherited a church of 12 people, and a holiday rolls around. And so my first official weekend, there was myself, my wife, our 3.5-year-old daughter, and our 3-month-old son at the time. And then 3 other people showed up. One of them was a lovely couple who were in their late 80s, who had been saved longer than I'd been alive. I don't know how to delicately say it, but their mansion in heaven was already done. God was waiting on the doormat to come in at that point. And then the other guy that was there was having some medical situations, and so he was on very, very heavy medication. And so there's a lot of peace in the house of God. And so mixed with that and the medication, he would fall fast asleep as soon as the service began. And he didn't sit in the back, he sat on the very front row. And so he would sit on the front row and sleep. And so my first Sunday, I'm not exaggerating this. These are all verifiable facts. My first Sunday is there are 3 people in the room besides my family, and 1/3 of my congregation is going to be asleep in a matter of moments. And everything in me was saying, quit, shut the service down. So I asked, my wife sings, so I said, hey, go just start singing a couple of songs. We'll sing, and let's see if anybody else shows up. It is miserable. My wife is amazing. She's powering through this, leading these 3 people and myself in these songs. And there's this internal battle that is raging. I've never experienced anything like it. There's moments when you're in church and the presence of God is palpable, and God is in the room, and you can feel it. God's here. It was like that, but the opposite. It was the presence of fear, of just it was literally a storm of discouragement. And I was sitting there thinking, this is stupid. I've made a terrible mistake. I was sitting there, like, pride. It's funny how pride popped up in my life, because I was thinking, there is no way I'm getting up and preaching a message to 3 people. I came from a really large church where, it was a church of a couple of thousand people. So like that was the audience that I was used to speaking to. And now here's this humbling moment where 3 people are in the room. It's a holiday weekend. I'm battling like this, the most intense discouragement I've ever felt in my life. Like I don't know how to accurately articulate it. It was real. It was powerful. The enemy's like breathing all this stuff in my ear. You've made a terrible mistake. You're done. You're finished. And somewhere in that, I heard a still small voice say, "This matters for more than just today. Like this isn't just about today, that this is about something greater." And so I just made a decision, like that it mattered, that I was where God wanted me to be, that God called us to do it. And so I got up and I preached my heart out to those three people. And like, I'd love to say that people started streaming in the doors as I preached, or something, shifted in the atmosphere. Nothing happened, but man, something really happened in my heart, because it was a day I put a stake in that God had called me there, and I wasn't going to base my ministry on circumstances, and my calling wasn't determined on how many people were in the room. That God called us there, and we were going to do what God called us to do. It was a shifting day for us.
I think that times like that, when you're at the very beginning and it could clearly have been a terrible mistake, I think that really seals your marriage, because you guys, you have nobody to turn to. There's no escape. It's like you guys, I'm sure you had some epic bad days in your marriage.
Yeah, it was a crazy season of transitioning our lives. Like, the way that we did it, we both had to go all in together in order to, we ended up, kind of skipping ahead a little bit, we ended up replanting the church. In order to do that, we had to break away from an organization and a denomination that we were a part of. And the cool thing about that was my wife and I both had relationships there. And so I call it filing relational bankruptcy. You liquidate every relationship you have. And Heidi and I had to do that together. And it was a decision that we made together. And so, there's obviously been some hard times, especially walking through the financial stuff and walking through the relational stuff. But it really did. You said it. I think it cemented us in our relationship together. And so now we co-pastor, we co-lead the church, because that's how we roll. We've been in this thing together for the past 9 years.
It's like every success story. I can't say every, I'm going to say 9 out of 10 success stories of a church or a business that God called you to launch, or some big ministry, whatever it is. Occasionally we hear about and celebrate the people that were an overnight success, and a ton of people came in the first year. They're the fastest growing church and it was amazing, and we all like celebrate that. But I think that there's an extra level of sweetness on the things that require just daily grind, daily obedience. And after you look back from 2 years, then you're like, wow, I'm here now. I'm so thankful I'm not where I started, but it didn't happen like I thought. Like, wow, it just changed. It was like, I'm going to be faithful today. And that was hard, but I'm going to be faithful again tomorrow. Like in our business, I literally started by teaching myself web development. And I would get up at our house here in California at 4:30 in the morning before I would go to my normal job, which I had to leave for at 7:30. And I would just put in, I would just learn. It felt kind of like useless, just like you were preaching to 3 people. And it was like, am I really going to do this? I mean, I remember the first client I got, I did it for like $100. And I was just learning, and it felt so, it's, humiliating, almost, like in the right way, like adding humility into your life, just putting in the time. But I did that like for a year, and then little by little on Saturdays, and then getting better. And, I still to this day, we're a much bigger company now, and I'm obviously a much different place, but I still have that same mentality of, hey, I'm just going to give my all today and be faithful, even if I have to work long, even if I have to, if I have to trust God to just see that I'm being faithful with today. And in 10 years from now, I know that my story will be like, hey, remember back when? And I think that's what you experienced at CoastLife, is look where you are now. but you started not just because you had 3 people, but because you did give that message, and you did stay, and you did say, well, hey, God called us here, so we're just going to be faithful with what we got now. And that's probably still in your DNA today.
Yeah, the Bible says, "Don't despise the day of small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." And that was our verse, man. Like, we just made a decision that we weren't going to allow the smallness to define who we were. And looking back on it, we didn't even realize a lot of what was happening around us. But it wasn't. Everybody's looking for a tree. But God doesn't give out trees. He usually gives out seeds and asks you to be faithful with the seed. And inside the seed is the possibility that if God's in it, the kingdom grows. It's like a mustard seed planted in a garden, and then it becomes the largest of all trees in the garden. And we all feel entitled to trees, but God hands out seeds of faithfulness. He says, let me trust you with this seed and see what you can do with it. And when I look back, I realized that, like preaching to those 3 people, that God didn't give me a tree. He didn't give me a massive, thriving church with a big budget. He just gave me a seed to preach to 3 people, and that seed kind of took off. And it's sometimes hard to notice when God's handing you something significant, because it's easy to overlook it because of its smallness. And I always it's incredible because 5 pounds of flour is the same as 5 pounds of gold. They both weigh the same, but their value is infinitely different. And I think sometimes God hands us something and we don't treat it the way that we should treat it, because we don't recognize the value in what God handed us. And sometimes we're treating like a small opportunity like I received, we're treating it like flour, not recognizing that it's gold to God. Like it was something incredibly valuable, like a call of God, a promise from God, an opportunity that God gives you. It doesn't matter if it's big or small. It's got incredible value because the kingdom of God is in it. And when you're faithful with the seed, God has a way of growing it into a tree. And that's what I see in our church today, is it's just grown into an incredible tree.
Yeah, I think that part of the reason that we overlook, I love what you said, that's so wise about we overlook it because it was so small. But I think the reason that we do is because human nature is we celebrate the end result. We celebrate a big church. We celebrate a business that made it. And so that's what our heart wants. We want that. We don't want a seed. And I think we have to celebrate the process, not the end result. And so for me, I celebrate in my, what I would consider to be daily faithfulness and that's the celebration. It's the journey, not the end result. And I think people want to should ask God for something to be faithful with and not worry about the end result. I just want to be faithful with whatever you want me to do. And I think that's a way to not overlook something small, is just be faithful with whatever you got. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, that's our story. We've never had like wild explosive growth. We've just grown year after year. I was reading Deuteronomy 7 just earlier, a couple of days ago, where it's talking about the whole land is yours, but I'm not going to drive them out. I'm not going to drive out your enemies all at once. And God says this in Deuteronomy 7. He said, I'm going to drive them out little by little, because you're not in a place where you can control the land. If I gave you all the land, it would grow wild and the beast of the field would take over. In other words, Israel hadn't developed yet to the place where they could steward the thing that God was going to give them. God literally had more for them than they were able to handle. And so in his wisdom and his grace, he didn't give it to them all at once. He let them go fight some battles and take it one day at a time. And I look back and just, we weren't in a place to be able to handle all that God had for us in that moment. So it was just each battle of battling like breaking the 50 barrier. I mean, that's a barrier most people like. They launch with launch teams bigger than 50 people. Well, that was a barrier we had to break. 100, 200, 300. You just go down the list, and it's just been walking in that faithfulness and watching God just drive them out little by little, empowering us to just inherit what he's already promised. It's already ours. We just got to walk it out in faithfulness and see him bring it to pass.